Shalom, shalom, everybody. It's your boy Shallow. All right. Shallow here with your next installment of the 48 Laws of Power. Law 33. Law 33. Discover each man's thumbnail. 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, a Joyce Elfer's book. Ooh, 32 laws down. We on law number 33. Discover each man's thumbnail. All right. Judgment. Everyone has a weakness, a gap in the castle wall. That weakness is usually an insecurity, an uncontrollable emotion or need. It can also be a small secret pleasure. Either way, once found, it is a thumbscrew you can turn to your advantage. Finding the thumbscrew. A strategic plan of action. We all have resistances. We live with a perpetual armor around ourselves to defend against change and the intrusive actions of friends and rivals. We would like nothing more than to be left to do things on our own. Constantly butting up against these resistances will cost you a lot of energy. One of the most important things to realize about people, though, is that they all have a weakness, some part of their psychological armor that will not resist, that will bend to your will if you find it and push on it. Some people wear their weaknesses openly, others disguise them. Those who disguise them are often the ones most effectively undone through that one chink in their armor. Pay attention to gestures and unconscious signals. As Sigmund Freud remarked, no mortal can keep a secret. If his lips are silent, he chatters with his fingertips. Betrayal oozes out of him at every pore. This is a critical concept in the search of a person's weakness. It is revealed by seemingly unimportant gestures and passing words. The key is not only what you look for, but where and how you look. Everyday conversation supplies the richest mind of weakness. So train yourself to listen. Start by always seeming interested. The appearance of a sympathetic ear will spur anyone to talk. A clever trick often used by 19th century French statesman Talleyrand is to appear to open up to the other person, to share a secret with them. It can be completely made up, or it can be real, but of no great importance to you. The important thing is that it should seem to come from the heart. This will usually elicit a response that is not only as frank as yours, but more genuine, a response that reveals a weakness. If you suspect that someone has a particular song, if he laps up your, no matter how obvious you are on the right track. Train your eye for details. How someone tips a waiter. Excuse me. Train your eye for details. How someone tips a waiter. What delights a person. The hidden messages in clothes. Find people's idols, the things they worship and will do anything to get. Perhaps you can be a supplier of their fantasies. Remember, since we all try to hide our weaknesses, there is little to be learned from our conscious behavior. What oozes out in little things outside of our conscious control is what we want to know. Find the helpless child. Most weaknesses begin in childhood, before the self builds up. before the self. Oh man, why am I not compensation? No, compensatory. Compensatory defenses. The weakness begins in childhood before the self builds up compensatory defenses. Perhaps the child was pampered or indulged in a particular area, or perhaps a certain emotional need went unfulfilled. As he or she grows old, the indulgence or deficiency may be buried but never disappears. Knowing about a childhood never needs knowing about a childhood need gives you a powerful key to a person's weakness. One sign of this weakness is that when you touch on it, the person will often act like a child. Be on the lookout then for any behavior that should have been outgrown. If your victim's survivals went without something important, such as parental support, when they were children, supply it. Or it's what is this word? Shit. Facsimile. 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 I think that's what it is. Facsimile. Facsimile. Supply it or its facsimile. Facsimile. The exact reproduction. The exact reproduction of a picture, a document, a coin, or a print, etc. Facsimile. Facsimile. If they reveal a secret taste, a hidden indulgence, indulge it. In either case, they will be unable to resist it. Look for contrast. An overt trait often conceals its opposite. People who thump their chests are often big cowards. A prudish exterior may hide a lascivious soul. The uptight are often screaming for adventure. The shy are dying for attention. By probing behind appearances, you will often find people's weaknesses in the opposite of their qualities they reveal to you. Find the weak link. Sometimes, in your search for weaknesses, it is not what but who that matters. In today's versions of the court, there is often someone behind the scenes who has a great deal of power, a tremendous influence over the person superficially on top. These behind the scenes power brokers are the group's weak link. When they're favoring you indirectly influence the king. Alternatively, even in a group of people acting with the appearance of one will, as when a group under attack closes ranks to resist the outsider, there is always a weak link in the chain. Find the one person who will bend under pressure. Fill the void. The two main emotional voids to fill are insecurity and unhappiness. The insecure are suckers for any kind of social validation. As for the chronically unhappy, look for the roots of their unhappiness. The insecure and the unhappy are the people least able to disguise their weaknesses. The ability to fill their emotional voids is a great source of power and an indefinitely prolongable one. Feed the uncontrollable emotions. The uncontrollable emotion can be a paranoid fear, a fear disproportionate to the situation, or any base motive such as lust, greed, vanity, or hatred. People in the grip of these emotions often cannot control themselves, and you can do the controlling for them. Observance of the law. Observance 1. In 1615, the 13-year-old Bishop of Lucan, later known as Cardinal Richelieu, gave a speech before representatives of the three states of France, clergy, nobility, and commoners. Richelieu had been chosen to serve as the mouthpiece of the clergy, an immense responsibility for a man still young and not particularly well known. On all of the important issues of the day, the speech followed the church line. But near the end of it, Richelieu did something that had nothing to do with the church and everything to do with his career. He turned to the throne of the 15-year-old King Louis XIII and to the Queen Mother, Maria de Medicis, who sat beside Louis, and as the regent ruling France until her son reached his majority. Everyone expected Richelieu to say the usual kind words to the young king. Instead, however, he looked directly at and only at the Queen Mother. Indeed, his speech ended in long and fulsome praise of her, praise so glowing that it actually offended some in the church. But the smile on the Queen's face as she lapped up Richelieu's compliments were unforgettable. A year later, the Queen Mother appointed Richelieu Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, an incredible coup for the young bishop. He had now entered into the inner circle of power, and he studied the workings of the court as if it were a machinery of a watch. An Italian, Consenco Concini, was the Queen Mother's favorite. An Italian, Consenco Concini, was the Queen Mother's favorite, or rather her lover, a role that made him perhaps the most powerful man in France. Concini was vain and foppish. Let's see what foppish means. Foppish. 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 Concini was vain and foppish. Foppish is in here. Fop or foppish. A man excessively interested in his dress. Concini was vain and excessively interested in his dress, or foppish. And Richelieu played him perfectly, attending to him as he were the king. Within months, Richelieu had become one of Concini's favorites, but something happened in 1617 that turned everything upside down. The young king, who up until then had shown every sign of being an idiot, had Concini murdered and his most important associates imprisoned. In so doing, Louis took command of the country with one blow, sweeping the Queen Mother away. Had Richelieu played it wrong? He had been close to both Concini and Maria de Medicis, whose advisors and ministers were now all out of favor. Some even arrested. The Queen Mother herself was shut up in the Louvre, a virtual prison. Richelieu wasted no time. If everyone was deserting Marie de Medici, he would stand by her. He knew Louis could not get rid of her, for the king was still very young and had in any case always been inordinately attached to her. As Marie's only remaining powerful friend, Richelieu filled the valuable function of liaison between the king and his mother. In return, he received her protection and was able to survive the palace coup, even to thrive. Over the next few years, the Queen Mother grew still more dependent of him, and in 1622, she repaid him for his loyalty. Through the insurrection of her allies in Rome, Richelieu was elevated to the powerful rank of cardinal. By 1623, King Louis was in trouble. He had no one he could trust to advise him. And although he was now a young man instead of a boy, he remained childish in spirit, and affairs of state came hard to him. Now that he had taken the throne, Marie was no longer the regent, but theoretically he theoretically had no power. But she still had her son's ear, and she kept telling him that Richelieu was the only possible savior. At first, Louis would have none of it. He hated the cardinal with a passion, only tolerating him out of love for Marie. In the end, however, isolated in the court, crippled by his own indecisiveness, he yielded to his mother and made Richelieu first his chief counselor and later prime minister. Now Richelieu no longer needed Marie de Medici. He stopped visiting and courting her, stopped listening to her opinions, even argued with her and opposed her wishes. Instead, he concentrated on the king, making himself indispensable to his new master. All the previous premiers, understanding the king's childishness, had tried to keep him out of trouble. The shrewd Richelieu played him differently, deliberately pushing him into one ambitious project after another, such as the crusade against the Huguenots, and finally an extended war with Spain. The immensity of these projects only made the king more dependent of his powerful premier, the only man able to keep order in the realm. And so, for the next 18 years, Richelieu exploited the king's weaknesses, governed and molded France according to his own visions, unifying the country and making it a strong European power for centuries to come. Ooh, my back, boy. Oh. Interpretation. Richelieu saw everything as a military campaign, and no strategic move was more important to him than discovering the enemy's weaknesses and applying pressure to them. Apply that pressure. As early as his speech in 1615, he was looking for the weak link in the chain of power, and he saw it in the Queen Mother. Not that Marie was obviously weak. She governed both France and her son, but Richelieu saw that she was really an insecure woman who needed constant masculine attention. He showered her with affection and respect, even toadying up to her favorite. Let's see. Toadying. 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 What's not there? He showered her with affection and respect, even toadying up to her favorite, Caccini. He knew the day would come when the king would take over, but he also recognized that Louis loved his mother dearly and would always remain a child in relation to her. The way to control Louis then was not by gaining his favor, which could change overnight, but by gaining sway over his mother, for whom his affection would never change. Once Richelieu had the possession he desired, prime minister, he discarded the Queen Mother, moving on to the next weak link in the chain, the king's own character. Whew. There was a part of him that would always be a helpless child in need of higher authority. It was on the foundation of the king's weakness that Richelieu established his own power and fame. Remember, when entering the court, find the weak link, the person in control. There was part of him. Oh, yeah, never mind. Remember, when entering the court, find the weak link. The person in control is often not the king or queen. It is someone behind the scenes, and the favorite, the husband or the wife. Even the court fool, the person may have more weaknesses than the king himself, because his power depends on all kinds of capricious factors outside his control. Finally, when dealing with helpless children who cannot make decisions, play on their weaknesses and push them into bold ventures, they will have to depend on you even more. For you will become the adult figure whom they rely on to get them out of scrapes and safety. Out of scrapes and to safety. Observance number 2. In December of 1925, guests of the swankiest hotel in Palm Beach, Florida, watched with interest as a mysterious man arrived in a Rolls Royce driven by a Japanese chauffeur. Over the next few days, they studied this handsome man, who walked with an elegant cane, received telegrams at all hours, and only engaged in the briefest of conversations. Was a count. He was a count, they heard, Count Victor Lutzwing, and he came from one of the wealthiest families in Europe. But this was all they could find out. Man, hold up. Over the next few days, they studied this handsome man who walked with an elegant cane, received telegrams at all hours, and only engaged in the briefest of conversations. He was the Count, they heard, Count Victor Lutzwing, and he came from one of the wealthiest families in Europe. But this was all they could find out. Imagine their amazement when Lutzwing one day walked up to one of the least distinguished guests in the hotel, a Mr. Herman Lawler. Oh man, I'm trying to figure out if I'm gonna be able to make it. Imagine their amazement. Then, when Lutzwing one day walked up to one of the least distinguished guests in the hotel, a Mr. Herman Lawler. Now I've been cutting grass all day. Well, not all day. I'll take it back a lot. I apologize for that. I've been cutting grass for a while. And I'm tired. I'm trying to read this before I lay down. Mr. Herman Lawler, head of the engineering company, and entered into conversation with him. Lawler had made his fortune only recently, and forging social connections was very important to him. He felt honored and somewhat intimidated by the sophisticated man who spoke perfect English with a hint of a foreign accent. Over the days to come, the two became friends. Lawler, of course, did most of the talking, and one might be confused that his business was doing poorly. With more troubles ahead, in return, Lutzwing confided in new friend that he too had serious money problems. Communists had seized his family's estate. And all its assets. He was too old to learn a trade and go to work. Luckily, he had found an answer: a money-making machine. You counterfeit? Lawler whispered in half shock. No, Lutzwing replied. explaining that through a secret chemical process, his machine could duplicate any paper currency with complete accuracy. Woo-wee. Excuse me, my bad. Put in a dollar bill, and 6 hours later, you had two. Damn, that's a long time. 6 hours? Both perfect. He proceeded to explain how the machine had been smuggled out of Europe, how the Germans had developed it, how it had supported the count for several years, and on and on. When Lawler insisted on the demonstration, the two men went to Lutzwick's room, where the Count produced a magnificent mahogany box fitted with slots, cranks, and dials. Lawler watched as Lutzwick inserted the dollar bill into the box. Sure enough, early the following morning, Lutzwick pulled out two bills, still wet from the chemicals. Got 2 more pages left, man. 2 more pages. I am done. Ooh, man. All right. Interpretation. Count Lutzwick had an eagle eye for other people's weaknesses. He saw them in the smallest gestures. Lawler, for instance, overtip waiters seemed nervous in conversation with the concierge. Talked loudly about his business. He saw them. He talked loudly about his business. His weakness, Lutzwick knew, was his need for social validation and for the respect that he thought and for the respect that he thought his wealth had earned him. He was also chronically insecure. Lutzwick had come to the hotel to hunt for prey. In Lawler, he homed in on the perfect sucker, a man hungering for someone to fill the psychic void. In offering Lawler his friendship, then Lutzwick knew he was offering him the immediate respect of the other guests. As the Count, Lutzwick was also offering the newly rich businessman access to the glittering world of old wealth. Oh. Oh man, all right. In offering Lawler his friendship, then Lutzwick knew he was offering him the immediate respect of the other guests. As a Count, Lutzwick was also offering the newly rich businessman access to the glittering world of old wealth. And for the coup de grace, he apparently owned a machine that would rescue Lawler from his worries. It would even put him on par with Lutzwick himself, who had also used the machine to maintain his status. No wonder Lawler took the bait. Remember, when searching for suckers, always look for is dissatisfied, the unhappy, the insecure. Such people are riddled with weaknesses and have need that you can feel. Their neediness is the groove in which you place your thumbnail and turn them at will. Observance number 3. In the year 1559, the French king Henry II died in a jousting exhibition. His son assumed the throne, becoming Francis II. But in the background stood Henry's wife and queen, Catherine de' Medici, a woman who had long ago proven her skill in a fairer state. When Francis died the next year, Catherine took control of the country as regent, and her next son in line of succession, the future Charles IX, a mere 10 years old at the time. The main threats to the queen's power were Anton the Bourbon, King of Navarre, King of Navarre, and his brother Louis, the powerful king of Cody, both of whom could claim the right to serve as regent instead of Catherine, who, after all, was Italian, a foreigner. Catherine quickly appointed Anton lieutenant general of the kingdom, a title that seemed to satisfy his ambition. It also meant that he had to remain in court, where Catherine could keep an eye on him. Her next move proved smarter still. Anton had a notorious weakness for young women. So she assigned one of her most attractive maids of honor, Louis de Root, to seduce him. Now Anton's intimate, Louis reported all of his actions to Catherine. The move worked so brilliantly that Catherine assigned another of her maids to Prince Cody, and thus was formed her escadron volante, flying squadrons of young girls who she used to keep the unsuspecting males in the court under her control. In 15, I guess she was like it sounded like she was a madam. Sounded like she was a madam. In 15, to put a family that had always struggled against her so close to power was moved. So to make sure of Henry's loyalty, she unleashed on him the loveliest member of her flying squadron, Charlotte de Ben Semblanque, Baroness of Salves. Catherine did this even though Henry was married to her daughter. Within weeks, Marguerite de Valois wrote in her memoirs, de Salve so completely ensnares my husband that we no longer slept together, nor even conversed. The Baroness was an excellent spy and helped to keep Henry under Catherine's thumb. When the Queen's youngest son, the Duke of Alençon, grew so close to Henry that she feared the two might plot against her, she assigned the Baroness to him as well. This most infamous member of the flying squadron quickly seduced Alençon, and soon the two young men fought over her, and their friendship quickly ended, along with the danger of a conspiracy. Interpretation. Catherine had seen very early on that the sway a mistress had over a man of power. Her own husband, Henry II, had kept one of the most infamous mistresses of them all, Diane de Poitiers. What Catherine learned from the experience was that a man like her husband wanted to feel he could win a woman over without having to rely on his status, which he had inherited rather than earned. And such a need and such a need contained a huge blind spot. As long as the woman began the affair by acting as if she had been conquered, the man would fail to notice that the time past the mistress had come to hold power over him, as Diane the portieres did over Henry. It was Catherine's strategy to turn this weakness to her advantage. Hoo-wee. Using it as one of the as a way to conquer the court, her flying squadrons. Excuse me. Using it as a way to conquer and control men. Ooh-wee. Ooh-wee. Excuse me. All she had to do was to unleash the loveliest woman in the court of a flying squadron on men, and she knew men whom she knew shared her husband's vulnerability. Remember, always look for passions and obsessions that cannot be controlled. The stronger the passion, the more vulnerable the person. This may seem surprising, for passionate people look strong. In fact, however, they are simply filling the stage with their theatricality, distracting people from how weak and helpless they really are. A man's need they cannot conceal, and over which they have the least control. And what people cannot control, you can control for them. Ooh-wee. I'm telling you, boy, after I read this, oh man, I might lay down for a minute. Ooh. Yeah, after I read this, I might lay down for a minute. And I'm almost done. Damn, thought I was almost done. 2 pages. I said 2 pages a minute ago. Really 2 more pages. And that's why I'm trying to read through it fast. Whew. Observance number 4. Arabella Huntington, wife of the great late 19th century railroad magnate Collis P. Huntington, came from humble origins and always struggled for social recognition among her wealthy peers. When she gave a party on her San Francisco mansion, few of the social elite would show up. Most of them took her for a gold digger, not their kind. But if her husband of her husband's fabulous wealth, art dealers courted her, but with such condensation, I mean, not condensation, with such condescension, they obviously saw her as an upstart. Only one man of consequence treated her differently. For the first few years of Devine's relationship with Arabella, he made no effort to sell expensive art to her. Instead, he accompanied her to fine stores, chanted endlessly about queens and princes he knew, on and on. At least she thought a man who treated her as an equal, even a superior in high society. Meanwhile, if Devine did not try to sell art to her, he did not aesthetic ideas. Namely, the best art was the most expensive art. And after Arabella had soaked up his way of seeing things, Devine would act as if she always had exquisite taste, even though before she met him, her aesthetics had been abysmal. When Collis Huntington died in the 1900s, Arabella came into a fortune. She suddenly started to buy expensive paintings by Rembrandt and Velasquez, for example, and only from Devine. Years later, Devine sold her Gainsborough's Blue Boy for the highest price ever paid for a work of art at the time, an outstanding purchase for a family that previously had shown little interest in collecting. Interpretation. Joseph Devine instantly understood Arabella Huntington and what made her tick. She wanted to feel important, at home in society, intensely insecure about her lower class background. She needed confirmation of her new social status. Devine waited. Instead of rushing into trying to persuade her to collect art, he suddenly went to work on her weaknesses. He made her feel that she deserved the attention, not because she was a wife of one of the wealthiest men in the world, but because of her own special character. Woo-wee. So, and this completely melted her. Devine never condescended to Arabella. Rather than lecture to her, he instilled his ideas in her indirectly. The result of one of his best and most devoted clients, and also the sale of Blue Boy. Oh, excuse me. People's need for validation and recognition, their need to feel important, is the best way of weakness to exploit, the best kind of weakness to exploit. First of all, it's almost universal. Second, exploit is so very easy. All you have to do is say, is find ways to make people feel better about their case. Oh, man, it's killing me. It's killing me. But we almost there. Whew. First, it is almost universal. Second, exploiting it is very easy. All you have to do is find ways to make people feel better about their taste, their social standing, their intelligence. Once the fish is hooked, you can reel them in again and again. For years, you are filling a positive role, giving them what they cannot get on their own. They may never suspect that you are turning them in, like a thumbnail, like a thumbscrew. And if they do, they may not care, because you are making them feel better about themselves, and that is worth any price. Observance number 5. Oh, Lord. Observance number 5. Yeah, these are the last pages. This one was kind of long, or at least it was long because I'm man, yawned and hit me. I'm on page 279, Gabriel. Law 30. Hey, we got one more page, like really page and a half left. Observance number 5. In 1862, King William of Prussia named Otto von Bismarck premier and minister for foreign affairs. Bismarck was known for his boldness, his ambition, and his interest in strengthening the military. Since William was surrounded by liberals in his government and cabinet, politicians who already wanted to limit his powers, it is quite dangerous for him to put Bismarck in this sensitive position. His wife, Queen Augusta, had tried to dissuade him, but although she usually got her way with him, this time William stuck to his guns. Only 1 week after becoming prime minister, Bismarck made an impromptu speech to a few dozen ministers to convince them of the need to enlarge the army. He ended by saying, "The great questions of the time will be decided not by speeches and resolutions of majorities, but by iron and blood." His speech was immediately disseminated throughout Germany. The queen screamed at her husband that Bismarck was a barbaric militaristic who was out to usurp control of Prussia, and that William had to fire him. The liberals in the government agreed with him, and that William had to fire him. Excuse me. The liberals in the government agreed with him. The outcry was so vehement that William began to be afraid he would end up on the scaffold, like Louis the 14th. Like Louis the 16th of France, if he kept Bismarck on as prime minister. Bismarck knew he had to get to the king before it was too late. He also knew he had blundered, and should have tempered his fiery words. Yet, as exact opposite, yet as he contemplated his strategy, he decided not to apologize, but to do as the exact opposite. Bismarck knew the king's will. When the two men met, William, predictably, had been worked into a tizzy by the queen. He reiterated his fear of being guillotined, but Bismarck only replied, "Yes, then we shall be dead. We must die sooner or later. And could there be a more respectable way of dying?" "I should die fighting for the cause of my king and master. Your Majesty would die sealing with your own blood your royal rights granted by God's grace. Whether upon the scaffold or upon the battlefield makes no difference to the glorious staking of body and life on behalf of rights granted by God's grace." On he went, appealing to William's sense of honor and the majesty of his position as head of the army. How could the king allow people to push him around? Wasn't the honor of Germany more important than quibbling over words? Not only did the prime minister convince the king to stand up to both his wife and his parliament, he persuaded him to build up the army. Bismarck's goal all along. Interpretation. Bismarck knew the king felt bullied by those around him. He knew that William had a military background and a deep sense of honor, and that he felt ashamed of his cravenness. His cravenness before his wife. Cravenness. Oh, you up, man? Cravenness. 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 I wonder if it has to do with crave. You all right? Go get that air water, please. Can you go get that air water? Dad need the water so bad. Daddy feel like he moving sluggish. Sluggish. Can you go get me a water, please, DJ? Cravenness is not in here. And that he felt ashamed at his cravenness before his wife and his government. William secretly yearned to be a great and mighty king, but he dared not express his ambition because he was afraid of ending up like Louis the 16th, where a show of courage often conceals a man's timidity. William's timidity concealed his need to show courage and thump his chest. Bismarck sensed the longing for glory beneath William's pacifist front, and he played to the king's insecurity about his manhood, finally pushing him into 3 wars and the creation of the German Empire. Timidity is a prominent weakness to exploit. Timid souls often yearn to be their opposites, to be Napoleons, yet they lack the inner strength. You are, in essence, can become their Napoleon because, you can become their Napoleon, pushing them into bold actions that serve your needs while also making them dependent on you. Remember, look to the opposites and never take appearances and face value. Don't rip my pages now, all right? You can look, just don't rip the pages. Image, the thumbscrew. Your enemy has secrets that he guards. Think thoughts he will not think, thoughts he will not reveal. But they come out in ways he cannot help. It is there somehow, a groove of weakness in his head, at his heart, over his belly. Once you find the groove, put your thumb in it and turn him at will. Authority. Find each man's thumbscrew. 'Tis the art of setting their wills in action. It needs more skill than resolution. You must know where to get at anyone. You must know where to get at anyone. Every volition has a special motive which varies according to taste. All men are idolaters, some of fame, others of self-interest, most of pleasures. All men are idolaters, some of fame, others of self-interest, most of pleasure. Skill consists in knowing these ideals in order to bring them into play. Knowing any man's mainspring of motive, you have as it were the key to his will. Balthazar Gracian, 1601 to 1558. 1601 to 1658, my bad. Reversal. Playing on people's weakness has one significant danger. You might stir up an action you cannot control. Playing on people's weakness has one significant danger. You might stir up an action you cannot control. In your game of power, you always look several steps ahead and plan accordingly. And you exploit the fact that other people are more emotional and incapable of such foresight. But when you play on their vulnerabilities, the areas over which they have least control, that was sister, we'll call her after. The areas of which they have least control, you can unleash emotions that will upset your plans. Push timid people into bold action, and they may go too far. Answer their need. What's wrong? No? What's wrong? Go get daddy some water. Go get daddy a bottle of water, and I'll open it for you. The helpless, childish element you are playing on can turn against you. The more emotional the weakness, the greater the potential danger. Know the limits to this game. Then and never get carried away by your control over your victims. You are after power, not the thrill of control. Oh Lord. Oh Lord. Yeah, I'm all right, my boy. That was a long one, DJ. That was a long one for me. I was struggling. I was about to fall asleep, but I finished it. All right, that was Law 33. Discover each man's thumbscrew. Judgment. Everyone has a weakness, a gap in the castle wall. That weakness is usually an insecurity, an uncomfortable emotion or need. It can also be a small secret pleasure, Either way, once found, it is a thumbscrew you can turn to your advantage. That was Law 33. Next time, we're going to come back with Law 34. Be royal in your own fashion. Act like a king to be treated like one. Judgment. The way you carry yourself will often determine how you are treated. In the long run, appearing vulgar or common. You don't want none? Did you want some water, DJ? Okay. Appearing vulgar or common will make people disrespect you. For a king respects himself and inspires the same sentiment in others. By acting regally and confident of your powers, you make yourself seem destined to wear a crown. That's Law 34. We'll get that one the next time. It's your boy Shiloh. With this edition of the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, a Joyce Elfer's book. We'll come back next time with Law 34. Thank you, everybody, for keeping up with me through the sleep monster weighing on my back. Oh, man. He was on my back hard. But, hey, hard work, baby. Hard work. We'll come back next time, though. Maybe tomorrow night. We'll see what's up. So, hey, with that, shalom, man. Everybody have a nice night. I hope y'all learned something. Go back, rewatch it. Learn something.